Hi, everyone. Sorry, of course, Zoom made me update, right? This is what happens when you have the live recordings, or not recordings, the live classes. I hope everyone's doing well. Let's see, we've got 13 people here, yikes. So I guess maybe I'm not the only one who had to update Zoom. So I'm assuming that we will have others joining us as we go because of that. Cool. In the meantime, I'll just, so most of you, I didn't check within the last 15 minutes or so, but most people had submitted the first lecture exam. The last I checked, a few people still hadn't, so hopefully you got that in on time. And yeah, like the semester is flying by. We basically have 2 weeks left, as I'm sure you're aware of. So hang in there, you know, you guys are making it through, and yeah, just do the best we can with what we have. All right, so I'm going to share screen this and make it big. Okay. Can you guys see the PowerPoint slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Cool. Let me put the chat box over here. Great. Yeah, so as you know, you had your lecture exam, and just so you know, just to keep you guys focused, is we have the next lecture exam 2 weeks from today, right? Which is crazy, I know. So make sure you stay focused, stay with it. You know, I'm always here via email if you guys need me. I'm very, very quick to respond, as most of you have found out who have emailed me so far. So if you have questions, email me, and also put them in the threads. So remember, actually, I'm going to stop sharing this real quick because I want to show you guys, and then people can see this on the recording later. Remember that for those pre-recorded lectures, the way you guys can get participation points for those lectures is to go onto Canvas. Here, I'm going to change this view. Is to go onto Canvas and you pull up the lecture slides for those pre-recorded lectures and you write a comment or a question there. And so many people have been doing that, but a lot of you have not been doing that. And so if you have yet to do that, I will still allow you to receive partial credit in terms of participation points. Let me show you where I'm talking about, because a few people said to me that they had issues finding where it is. So look here, I think I'm in student view. Let's make this. I think I'm in student view here. Yes, I am. So you guys should be able to see my browser right now. If you go to our class and you click on announcements, right? There will be some announcements there that are for the slides for the course. So you click on those slides, and underneath those slides is where you can write questions. And as you see, several people have been doing that. And that's how you get participation points for those pre-recorded classes. Remember, participation is worth 10% of your grade. So please, I mean, it's a whole letter grade. It's basically a fluff to give you guys more points so you can get that letter grade. So please participate there. If you haven't yet done so, you can go back to the old slides, and I will give you some partial credit for that. But going forward, I think we're all live from now on. So, okay, enough of that. Yeah, and that's all listed out in the syllabus too. So it's not the first time that you're hearing about this. Alrighty, okay, so stay focused is the take-home message. All right, today's class, I'm not gonna lie, it is a little sciencey, okay? You can already tell in the objectives that it's a little sciencey. It's gonna be okay. I'm gonna walk you through it like I always do. Don't be scared. But it's good that we're having this class live today because I'm guessing there's going to be some questions and confusion. We do have a decent amount of material to get through, so I'm gonna try to go as fast as I can with giving you the right amount of information. So we're gonna talk a little bit about different processes of cell division. We're going to talk about this phenomena called alternation of generations. which we'll go into in great detail, which is super important for plants. And then we're going to get introduced to some plants. We're going to today first learn about the non-vascular plants, which are little fuzzy things, mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. And then we'll talk just a little bit about asexual reproduction. So as I go forward, if you have any questions, you can feel free to write them in the chat box, and then I will call on you. If you want to unmute at that time, that's fine too. So that's fine. Blanca, thank you for letting me know that you're having issues with connection. Just know that I will record, this is being recorded, and I will post this later once it processes. Okay, let's get to it. So cell division, what are we talking about, right? You guys are not in science majors, so this is going to be a little bit of new topic for you, most likely. Maybe you had some of this in high school, for example. So there's two different processes of cell. So when we talk about cell division, we're talking about cells, right? Like cells of a body. Those cells can divide. And we've talked about that a bit when we talk about growth at the apical meristem, right? The meristematic cells divide and grow and things like that. So there's two types of cell division, mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis is kind of like the thing we were just talking about, right? Growth at that apical meristem, for example. So when mitosis occurs, the cells are either trying to grow the organism bigger or repair other cells that have been, replace other cells that have been damaged, right? And so this is going to seem a little confusing. Just stick with me, and after I get through it, if you have questions, I'm happy to address it. So where does mitosis occur? So mitosis occurs in all body cells. So your skin cells, your stomach cells, your bones, bone cells, and body cells are something that's called diploid. You might see a term here, diploid, which is a new term probably for you guys. I'll explain what that means in a second, but just so you have it here on this slide, mitosis occurs in body cells that happen to be diploid. Mitosis is a process of cell division. One cell will divide. When the cell divides, the result is two new cells that we call daughter cells. And those two cells are going to be identical to one another genetically because they came from a cell that had a certain, like, so let's say a skin cell divides, right? One of your skin cells divides and makes two new skin cells, right? Those two new skin cells are going to be genetically identical, right? Because they're your skin cells. And when those two cells that result are going to have the same chromosome number as each other, and they're also going to have the same chromosome number of the cell that made them, right? Which we call a mother cell. So this is a lot of information, I know. So just hold on. We're gonna pull it apart a little bit better. So here's a nice little schematic, a little diagram. Let me make this bigger. Whoops. Where you see a cell on the top. You see a cell on the top that is a body cell, right? So this here is a body cell. So you can imagine like a skin cell. And it's diploid, right? 2N, which we'll talk about in a second. And then that cell is going to undergo a process called mitosis, and the result is two new cells, right? And those two new cells are identical to each other in terms of genetics. They're genetically identical to each other, but each one is also genetically identical to the cell that made it. So that's mitosis. Mitosis is used for growth and repair. So look, this is just to give you kind of a, you can't be a tiny baby and grow into a grown-up, right? And then an older grown-up without your body making new cells and without your body repairing damaged cells. And so this is why we need mitosis to occur. So just like you can't be a baby and grow up into a grown-up human without mitosis, you also can't be a baby plant and grow up into a grown-up plant without this process. And then this is what I'm talking about with repair. That's why I use the example of a skin cell, because most likely all of you have at one point probably scraped your knee, right? Or something like that. And so when that happens, those cells are damaged. Those cells can't continue on, right? They'll die. But your knee will need to have new cells to cover new skin cells on that knee, right? So the adjacent cells to the injury will undergo mitosis and grow new cells to repair that. And the same process happens in plants if they get damaged. Okay, that's mitosis, and let's leave that aside for a second. The second process of cell division that we're going to talk about today is something called meiosis. Like meiosis. This is meiosis, not eurosis. No, this is meiosis. That's how you say that. And whereas mitosis was for growth and repairing damaged cells, the process of meiosis is for making gametes, egg and sperm. So I want you in your head, every time you see the word gametes, which is up here, you're gonna get in this habit. This will help you. If I can move this thing. Every time you see this word, gametes, I want you to think right away, egg and sperm. Gametes, egg and sperm. Gametes, egg and sperm. That's what I want you to think. Because that's what meiosis is for. Meiosis is for making gametes, egg and sperm. So the way that egg and sperm are made is a little different than like growing new skin cells. It's not the same thing. That's why we need meiosis. So mitosis occurred in body cells like your skin or your stomach. Meiosis occurs in sex cells, They're also diploid, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the difference, one major difference of meiosis versus mitosis is that in meiosis, you start with a diploid cell. Let's say, for example, in the testicles, right? In the testes, you'll have diploid cells. And those diploid cells will undergo this process of meiosis to produce sperm, which is haploid. So that just means it has half the chromosome number. See, chromosome number is reduced. We'll talk about it more. Don't worry, but I'm just trying to walk you through it. Meiosis is also a process of cell division, just like mitosis. But the difference here is instead of 2 daughter cells, the result of meiosis is 4 daughter cells. The daughter cells are all, and even if it's a sperm, we still call it a daughter cell, I know. The daughter cells are genetically identical to each other. They have the same chromosome number, but the daughter cells only have half the chromosome numbers as the original cell, hence haploid. So here you go. This is a nice little schematic to kind of give you this. In meiosis, we have a 2N cell that's located in the sex organs. I'll use pink, right? The cell is going to undergo, you don't need to know meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, just know meiosis, all right? That's all you need to know for basic plant science. But here's a cell, it's diploid, it's going to go through meiosis. Here's meiosis, it's going through it. And the result is 4 daughter cells. And as you can see here, all of these daughter cells are identical in chromosome number to each other, 1N, but all the daughter cells have half the chromosome number as the original cell, 2N. And I think I explained this, let me just, yes, I do. Okay, good. So, sum it up, mitosis is for growth and repair. Mitosis results in 2 daughter cells that have the same chromosome number as each other and the same chromosome number as the original cell. Meiosis is for making gametes, egg and sperm. And meiosis results in 4 cells, and each cell has the same chromosome number as each other, 1N, but half the chromosome number as the original cell. Okay. The reason we have to go over this is because it's the only way we could really understand the rest of the course, because plants and humans are different a little bit, right? We can't make we can't make food from the sun, right? So plants and animals are a little bit different, but they're also different in their life cycles. So you see here in humans, when you have meiosis occur, the direct result is gametes, egg and sperm, the direct result. So in a sex cell in a human, you have meiosis occur and you get egg and sperm. And that's what this schematic is trying to show you. Right. Just so you know, just to get you oriented. I don't know why the slide does this, but like a minus sign and a plus sign are supposed to show like different sexes. Like, so one of those might be a sperm and one of those might be an egg, right? Look, meiosis happened, you get sperm and egg. Eventually, sperm, let's say an egg, come together in this process of fertilization, giving you the new baby, right? Which will grow up into this diploid individual. This, I just in case you're looking at this slide and saying like, what the heck am I even looking at? All right, but this part is very important here, just to help you understand. Because probably meiosis and things like diploid and haploid are new concepts to you. So I really want to try to make you guys understand this. So here's what I was talking about before. Here's a human sex cell on the left, right? Maybe this is in the ovaries or in the testes. And those sex cells, for humans, we have 46 chromosomes. So that's what this number is here. So in humans, 2n is equal to 46, because we get 23 chromosomes from our dad and 23 chromosomes from our mom. And so 23 plus 23, when the egg and the sperm fuse, the result is 46. But we use this notation 2n when we talk about things being diploid, because all organisms have different numbers of chromosomes, right? A human being has 46, a worm has a different number, a banana tree has a different number of chromosomes. So rather than deal with the number, we just say 2n. That means the mature individual has 2n. But in humans, when you have meiosis occur, in male humans, you'll end up with sperm, right? And in female humans, you'll end up with egg. And eventually, those two things will fuse during fertilization such that the new individual will have 46 chromosomes. This is why meiosis is important, because if we didn't have meiosis, this is what would happen. Let's say if this human being, here, let me get rid of this. Clear all drawings. So this human being has 46 chromosomes. Let's say meiosis didn't occur, right? That would mean that the sperm would have 46 chromosomes, and then the egg would have 46 chromosomes. And then if those two things fuse together, the resulting individual would have 92 chromosomes. And then imagine that individual make sperm or egg without meiosis. The sperm would have 96 chromosomes. And then if it fused, it just doesn't work like that. So this is why we have to go from a diploid thing to a haploid thing when you're talking about these sex cells. I know that this is probably confusing. Just stick with it. It'll get easier as we keep talking about it. So in humans, meiosis leads directly to the production of gametes, egg and sperm. Plants are different. Plants are different and way more complicated in that in plants, when you have meiosis occur, you don't go directly to a gamete. Instead, plant life cycle has two separate individuals. I know. They have a diploid individual and they have a haploid individual. We will see what this means, don't worry. And the reason this is because they're just so much more, they showed it up on Earth way longer ago, and this is the system that they evolved to have. And we evolved later, and so we don't have to have two separate individuals for a single life cycle. So in plants, you have meiosis occur, And in plants, meiosis results in spores. And the spores are going to grow into haploid individuals that we call gametophytes. And we will talk about that going forward in a few slides. But these gamete, right? Gametes, again, sperm. These gametophytes are going to make gametes, egg and sperm. So it's a whole separate individual that makes egg and sperm. And when that egg and sperm comes together, you have your new diploid individual. So what does this all mean, Rebecca? Why are you telling us this? This is not fun. What this means is that plants have 2 phases or 2 generations per one life cycle. One life cycle, guys. So humans, we have 1 organism per life cycle, right? This is it. That's it. You're not going to be another. There's not. But plants have 2. Plants have 2 phases. 2 phases of 2 organisms per one life cycle. Well, I know. Okay. So this might seem like, what is she even talking about? I don't even know what she's talking about. Believe it or not, this general concept is something you've probably come into contact with before, in that most people know that you can't have a butterfly without having had a caterpillar, right? Most people know that. Now, this is not exactly the same way as it is in plants. What I'm about to show you here is not the exact same, but it helps you kind of understand this idea of multiple individuals for one life cycle. So this is one life cycle of a butterfly, right? This, you would agree that this caterpillar and this butterfly are 2 different things, right? But each of those things is part of a single life cycle, And that's kind of how it is with plants, but a little different. Oh, where'd it go? Right, so note, if you're looking at these slides later, note, this is not exactly the same thing that happens, but it kind of gets your brain primed to understanding this idea. All right, alternation of generations. So I told you that plants have, right? I told you here, in plants have 2 phases, 2 generations to complete one life cycle. And so alternation of those generations is the plant life cycle. So what is alternation of generation? It's the alternation between a haploid gametophyte plant generation and a diploid sporophyte plant generation in the life cycle of sexually reproductive plants. So every plant we've talked about so far, sunflower, banana, grasses, right? Anything like that has both of these generations for one life cycle. And this will help you later kind of understand this more. So the word sporophyte plant, sporo means spores and phyte means plant. So if you pull the word apart, it's a plant or a phyte, right? A plant that makes what? It makes spores. So a sporophyte plant is a plant that makes spores. And the sporophyte plant is diploid, and it's going to use meiosis to make those spores. Gametophyte plant, gameto refers to gametes, egg and sperm, and phyte refers to plant again. And so a gametophyte plant is a phyte or a plant that makes gametes, egg and sperm. And the way it's going to make those egg and sperm is going to be via mitosis, because the gametophyte plant is already haploid, because it grows from the spores. So the spores are going to grow into the gametophyte plant. And that's what was shown on the previous, some of those previous diagrams. Here are some other important terms. And again, as I know that this class is very heavy in new terms, but trust me, these terms that we're using today, gametophyte plant, sporophyte plant, and these terms shown here, they're going to show up in every class that we have remaining. And they'll also show up in every lab we have remaining as well. So today you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to be frustrated, but there's going to be so much repetition of these terms. In 2 weeks, you're going to be an expert. Okay. So try to stay positive. Here we go. So these are some important terms that we will need. So a sporangium, or plural sporangia, is a structure or an organ that makes spores. So just so you know, right, which plant makes spores? If sporophyte plant and gametophyte plant, which plant makes spores? Everyone's asleep or like TikTok.
Sporophyte.
Yes, thank you. Sporophyte, right? The sporophyte plant makes spores, and where those spores are made is a structure or an organ called a sporangium, or plural sporangia. Right, so sporophyte plants will have sporangia on them, and that's where spores are produced. And then there are sex organs. So we are familiar with human sex organs. Well, plants have sex organs too, but they're called different things than what we call them in humans. The male sex organs are called antheridium, plural antheridia. Notice this ending ia means the plural, right? So antheridium is one, many antheridia, and those are the male sex organs that make sperm. And then the female sex organs are archegonium, plural archegonia. And those are going to be the organs that makes and holds eggs, an egg. And so if the sporangia are on the sporophyte plant, where do you think these structures are that make egg and sperm? Oops. There's only two options. Well, we just said sporophyte plant makes spores, so it has to have a sporangium on it. Gametophyte plant makes egg and sperm. So the gametophyte plant is going to be where you have these. These will be on the gametophyte plant. Whereas this one up here is on the sporophyte plant. Okay. The next few slides we're going to walk through one cycle of alternation of generations with terms, and then we're going to walk through another version with an actual plant. But slides will be very useful for you when you're studying. So here you go, you got a sporophyte plant, right? Which I told you is diploid, or 2N. And on that sporophyte plant are structures or organs that make spores, right? That make spores, because sporophyte plant is a phyte, right? A plant that makes what? Makes spores. So on it, it has a organ that makes spores, sporangium. And inside the sporangium are cells that are still diploid, right? 2N inside of that sporangium. Those cells are going to undergo meiosis. And remember, we said meiosis makes, the result of meiosis is 4 things, 4 cells that are each haploid. And this word here, this is a fancy word. See this word here, tetrad? That's just a fancy word for 4. 4 spores. So sporophyte plant had a sporangium on it. Inside of that sporangium are these spore mother cells. Spore mother cells are going to undergo the process of meiosis, and the result of which will be 4 spores, or a tetrad of spores. We're going to talk now, we're just going to talk about one of those 4 spores, one spore. But this will happen with all 4 of the spores, right? We're just going to talk about one. So here's the spore. Notice the color change on the left. The things are kind of a bluish, purplish color. That's because those are diploid, or 2N. After meiosis occurs, the things are on the right side of the screen. It's hard to know which side is your right. The gold stuff on my right side are already haploid. You see, it says 1N next to those. So talk about one spore. It That spore is going to grow into a gametophyte plant. And when you hear the word grow, you should think of a certain process, but we'll leave that aside for right now, right? So the spore grows into a gametophyte plant, which is still haploid. And on that gametophyte plant, right? Remember, gametophyte, right? Gameto. So it's a phyte or a plant that makes what? Let me turn this off. A phyte or a plant that makes what? Gametes, egg and sperm, right? Gametes, egg and sperm. So since it's going to make egg and sperm, it has to have on it sex organs. It has male sex organs, which are called antheridia, or sorry, one antheridium, and has female sex organs, archegonia. Those sex organs are going to make, boom, right? Sperm and egg. And notice these are all still haploid or 1N. Eventually, sperm and egg are going to fuse together. 1N sperm plus 1N egg equals a 2N zygote, or the baby cell, right? Zygote cell. Notice the color change here, right? Sperm and egg come together, haploid sperm, haploid egg, boom, diploid or 2N zygote cell. And that 2N zygote cell is going to be the beginning of the new sporophyte plant, right? So that one cell will divide and grow into a embryo, which will be in the seed, like we saw in the seed thing, the seed lecture. And then that young embryo will grow into the mature sporophyte plant. So this is a whole, this is like a whole, hold on, sorry, I've got to clear some boxes here. This is a whole thing here of an overview of the alternation of generations with all the terms we've come across so far in the lecture. Notice these two processes, right? Meiosis and fertilization. Because when you have meiosis occur, you go to a haploid thing, right? Tetrad of spores that are 1N. And when fertilization occurs, you're back to that 2N or diploid individual. Oh, and so I said before, when you hear me say the word grow, when something grows, there's a process of cell division that's allowing that thing to grow, right? When I showed you on the slides earlier of a young human, and the young human had to grow into an adult human, or I showed you a baby plant emerging from the seed, and then eventually that grows into a mature plant. Every time you hear the word grow, you should be thinking, what process? So we have here fertilization, we have here meiosis. What process of cell division allows something to grow? And I'll give you guys a second to think about it.
Meiosis.
All right, so what was that, Jennifer?
Is it meiosis?
So meiosis is the one that we should see that, sorry. Blech.
So it's gametes. If it's not that, it's gametes.
So meiosis is a process, and fertilization is a process. But meiosis, the job of meiosis is to make sex cells, right? Sperm and eggs. In the plants, it takes a little while because you have to have a whole nother organism, but ultimately you end up with sperm and egg because of the process of meiosis. So meiosis is only with sperm and egg, only. Fertilization is when sperm and egg come together. But what did we talk about at the top of the class today? We had the very top of the class, we talked about two processes of cell division. Yes, Alexis, yes. Oh, Shanera, how do you say your name? Shanera? Maybe Shanera.
Yes, Shanera.
Okay, great. Yes, correct, mitosis, and Shemaya also mitosis, yes, okay, great, perfect. So my reason why I'm trying to show you this is because every time I want you to, just like I want you to say gametes, egg and sperm, gametes, egg and sperm, right? When you hear the word grow, I want you to think, boom, mitosis. Because look at this diagram here, right? We have a young embryo plant. All right, we have, fine, we'll start with the sporophyte plant, fine. Mature sporophyte plant. Mature sporophyte plant, while it's growing, it's going to have to grow a sporangium. And so the way it's going to grow a sporangium is through mitosis. And then the sporangiums need to grow some mother cells. And the way it's going to grow those is via mitosis. Once you have a spore, the result of meiosis, once you have a spore, the spore is going to grow into gametophyte plant. The way that's going to happen is it's going to grow via mitosis. Gametophyte plant has to grow sex organs on it. So you guessed it, that's going to be through mitosis, etc. Right? On here on the bottom, you had fertilization occurred. You have one zygote cell, one cell. That cell has to grow into a whole organism, right? A whole sporophyte plant. So the only way that's going to happen is mitosis and that embryonic. So that's, just know that all of these background mitosis is occurring all through this, right? All right. Shake it off, shake it off. A lot of information. Rebecca, why are you doing this to us? I'm sorry. I didn't make up mitosis or meiosis, and I didn't make up plants. Sorry. I'm trying to make it as clear as possible. Again, we'll have lots of repetition, so hang in there. All right, so we just looked at it in like boxes on a screen, right? We just looked at it boxes on a screen. That's helpful somewhat, but not really. So let's look at it in a plant, a real plant, like a drawing. It's a drawing, but fine, real plant. So here we go. Just the only thing I want you to note is that I don't know if everyone, I still wear a watch sometimes, but I don't know if you guys out there still wear watches, but just notice here that the sporophyte plant here starts at 9 o'clock, right? Just so you know, because on the following slide, sporophyte plant is going to start right at 12 o'clock, right up here. So just keep that in mind as we go through these things here. Okay, so here's your sporophyte plant, which is diploid. This is a fern. This is a fern. And on that sporophyte plant, which is diploid, there are these structures or organs called pharangia. And those structures or organs are also diploid because they're on the sporophyte plant. And they're going to be the organs that make spores. How are they going to make spores? They're going to make spores through the process of meiosis, because meiosis takes a 2N cell, and the result is 1N or haploid cells, 4 of them. And in the case of plants, it's spores, tetrad of spores. So that's all, this little box here is all happening inside of that sporangium. Now we're going to talk about one spore. So these little dots, each of these little dots here, I don't know if you could see, there's one, etc. Those are all spores. So lots of meiosis occurred inside of that sporangium, right? Lots. So we're going to talk about one of them. Let's say we'll talk about this one right here. Oops. So that spore gets released into the air from the sporangium, and the spore will grow into gametophyte plant. Notice the color change on this slide, right? The purplish bluish color is still diploid, goldish yellow color is still haploid, right? Just like the previous example. So this little spore is going to grow via what? Right? Grow mitosis, right? Grow mitosis. So it's going to grow into this gametophyte plant. That gametophyte plant is going to grow into a slightly bigger gametophyte plant. So just showing you these are both gametophyte plants. And what gametophyte plants make? Gametes, egg and sperm, right? And so in order to make those, they have to have sex organs on them. And so that area of that gametophyte plant has female sex organs or archegonium. And oh, and I think I circle it. Okay, maybe not. Just so you know. right? Up here on this gametophyte plant, those little pokies are the female sex organs. And down here, these little dots are the male sex organs. They're going to look different depending on what plant you're looking at, but I'm just showing you that these sex organs are physically on the gametophyte plant, right? They're physically on it. So that's archegonium is a female sex organs, antheridium is a male sex organs. The female sex organs are going to make egg, and the male sex organs are going to make sperm. So just so you know, this, if we were to take one of these female sex organs and look at it close up, that's this. If we were going to take one of these male sex organs and look at it close up, that's this. Female sex organs make egg. Egg is right there in the middle. Male sex organs make sperm. Sperm is swimming out of the, these things swimming are sperm. Yes, believe it or not, a lot of plants have swimming sperm. Another example of when people say plants don't move is wrong, because a lot of plants actually make swimming sperm, believe it or not. Okay. So archegonium is going to make egg. Antheridium is going to make sperm. The sperm is going to swim. So this is an archegonium here. This is another archegonium here, just to show you what you're looking at. And so the sperm, here's one, it's going to swim, 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 and meet the egg. And that will show you this here, right? Egg and sperm. Once the egg and the sperm fuse, you have your 2N zygote cell. Notice the color change. And that 2N zygote cell is going to grow into the new sporophyte plant. So I'll use the same colors as on this slide. So look, this blue thing is a zygote because it is egg and sperm united. And notice though, it's still where the egg was, right? It's still inside of the archegonium because egg doesn't leave, egg stays. Just like in humans, egg stays, right? Wherever, when you have a baby, that's your egg was there, it stays, right? Egg doesn't leave. Sperm leaves, egg stays. I'm getting distracted. My point is I'm using the same colors. Blue dot that I just drew is a zygote cell, 2N, right? Egg plus sperm together. It's still inside of that archegonium though. Eventually, so look, here is the gametophyte plant where the archegonium was. And we see the new young embryo plant emerging out of it, right? There's the root of it there. Eventually, the gametophyte plant will go away and the result will be you'll just have oh, wrong color. You'll just have the sporophyte plant, which I'll use the same. This is all sporophyte plant, right? Okay. Again, I know today is tough. It will get better, just trust me, okay? So these circles I'm drawing here to show you the blue thing is the sporophyte plant, the gold thing is the gametophyte plant. Okay. The point is, this is not the same thing as butterfly and caterpillar, right? Not at all, not at all. It's still kind of similar in that you have two organisms in order to have a single one. Just in case you're curious, one main reason why this is not the same thing is because this butterfly is 2N. Whoops. Whoa. This butterfly is 2N, or diploid. What happened? Hold on, something. Oh. Okay, well, that's weird. Yeah, this butterfly, oh boy, changed my whole thing. Here, get big. This butterfly is 2N diploid, and also this caterpillar is 2N diploid. So it's not the same thing as what we see in the plants, because in the plants, it's a alternation of two generations. Okay, whatever. Okay, we're gonna learn about this process as it pertains to all different plant phyla. Remember, phyla is the plural of phylum, right? And And that's basically what the rest of the course focuses on, is looking at these different types of plants and how the alternation of generations is slightly different for all of those different plants. One thing that changes is a switch in the dominant generation, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But just suffice it to say that in the primitive plants, which we're going to talk about today, the mosses, the liverworts, and hornworts. In the primitive plants, it's the gametophyte generation that is dominant. What does that mean? It means if you see a moss or a liverwort or a hornwort, if you see one out and about, you're looking at the gametophyte generation because it's the dominant generation. The plant spends most of its life cycle as the gametophyte. But when we get to the more advanced plants, so all the vascular plants, there's a switch. And when you look at, let's say, a tree, when you're looking at the tree, you're seeing the sporophyte generation because that happened over time. That will also, so here's some examples. Let's stop looking at words. Here's some examples of when the gametophyte is dominant. So here's some mosses, for example, the green stuff on the rocks, and on the right, this kind of close up. So when you're looking at this green fluffy stuff, you're looking at the gametophyte generation because that's dominant in the mosses. Here is an example of what a sporophyte plant looks like in mosses. So I'll use the same colors as before. So this little thing up here is a sporophyte plant in mosses, and this green fluffy down here is the gametophyte plant. And so in the mosses and other primitive plants, non-vascular plants, the sporophyte plant is always attached to the gametophyte plant. It's never free. Never free, it's always attached. We'll have a bunch of repetition in that too. I'm just giving you a little overview. In the ferns, which is what we looked at in this, was ferns. This is a fern. So there's a life cycle in a fern. Ferns are kind of nice because you could easily see both generations with your naked eye. So on the left here, this is your gametophyte plant, right? It has female sex organs on it and male sex organs on it. Eventually, egg and sperm will fuse together. And when that happens, you get your new sporophyte plant, which I'm trying to draw in blue, which will grow out of the gametophyte plant. Eventually, the gametophyte plant will just go away, as we talked about. But this is nice because you can kind of see both. But ultimately, if you're walking around and you see a fern, you're looking at the sporophyte plant because ferns are vascular, and so they have the sporophyte plant as dominant. And then most of the plants you're familiar with, you see on the daily, like those are sporophyte dominant plants. So for example, flowering plants. So anytime you see a flower on a plant, you know you're looking at the sporophyte of that generation. You know you're looking at the sporophyte generation of that plant's life cycle. Okay, that's an overview of alternation of generations. Trust me, I'm going to tell you, even for biology students, even people who are fourth year biology students, who I also teach in spring, the concept of alternation of generations is not an intuitive one. This is a very different concept than we're ever used to dealing with. So if you're feeling right now a little overwhelmed with all the new terms and this whole idea of alternation of generations, it's totally normal to feel that way. And even I myself, when I first learned it, it was a very confusing concept. So don't feel bad if you feel that way. And as I said, we're going to use these terms so many times that you're going to become an expert. Okay, so don't get down. All right, so that was an overview of alternation of generations. Now we're going to get introduced to the non-vascular plants, unless somebody has a question that they would like me to address now. I know your brain's probably just like, what did I just look at? This stuff is crazy.
No,
Okay.
you're doing a pretty good job at explaining it well enough for us to understand. Well, I can't speak for everybody, but for a few of us, for us to understand. So you're doing fine.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Welcome. That's not for brownie points or anything. I'm doing pretty good in class. So I just wanted to
No,
let
no,
you
I
know
hear
that
you. I hear you. Trust
how we
me,
feel.
I'm alone in a room right now speaking into the air at a electronic box, right? So any feedback is much appreciated. All right.
Okay, great.
So that was alternation generations. Now let's get introduced to these non-vascular plants. All right. So this is a roadmap of the plant kingdom. So this is all the players of the plant kingdom that exist. Main thing I want you to notice from this is that, let's change colors to purple, right? So here's plant kingdom. You have non-vascular plants and you have the vascular plants. And the majority of the plants in the plant kingdom, right? Plant kingdom are vascular, right? So all these things. And we will, so today's class, just to give you kind of an idea of the rest of the course, today's class, we're going to learn about these. Next class, we're going to learn about these and these. And then the last class, we're going to learn about this, the flowering plants. So that's the rest of the course, basically. And then we have our final. So just this is where we're headed. Today, non-vascular plants, which are the mosses, the liverworts, and hornworts. They're kind of little green things. Like they're kind of blobby. Sometimes they're fluffy. They're just like little green things. You probably sometimes even walk by them and maybe you think that's like algae or mildew or something. They're, depending on the species, they're very, very small. They're very, very small. And they're just kind of, you'd have to look down to see them. Let's put it that way. We're going to learn about these three today. I'm going to give you the names of these phyla. Each of these are in different phyla, but I think for the purposes of this course, I will never give you, so like for example here, hornwort is in the phylum Anthocerophyta. Anthocerophyta. That's a mouthful. I'm okay if you guys don't know what Anthocerophyta is or know that word for the purposes of this class. So you'll see it on the slide, but I just want you to know hornwort, okay? Hornwort. But your book, for example, does mention these different phylum names. And so I want you to know where to look in the book for additional information, okay? But yeah, for this, we got hornwort. So hornwort is fine. So we're gonna learn about them. And then we're gonna learn about liverworts, which again, the book puts them in the phylum Hepatocophyta, and I've always taught it as Marcantiophyta. Don't worry about that, just worry about liverwort. So hornwort, liverwort, moss, okay? That's fine with me. Those three are fine. You don't need to phylum name. We're learning about those today. So here they are, the non-vascular plants. Why are they called bryophytes? Bryophytes is a term for all the non-vascular plants. So mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. The reason they're called bryophytes is because Greek is, bryon is Greek for moss. And so originally, when these plants were first discovered, people thought they were all mosses. They thought everything here was moss. But then as we've learned more about these plants, we know that there are mosses and liverworts and hornworts, all different things. And but they're still called the bryophytes from that. One characteristic of the bryophytes or the non-vascular plants is that they need water for sexual reproduction because the sperm swim. So they need water for the sperm to swim. But this is the major reason why we call them the non-vascular plants. This right here, right here. Bryophytes do not have xylem and do not have phloem tissue. They don't have it. They lack those things. Remember, xylem is the vascular, remember the vascular system, right? Vascular tissues, xylem and phloem. Xylem is what moves water throughout a plant. Phloem is what moves food throughout a plant. Well, the non-vascular plants, they are non-vascular. They don't have a vascular system. And that's why we call them more primitive plants. So that's why they're called that, okay? This is just so you know, like, if you have newly exposed habitat, so let's say you have a volcano that explodes and it like wipes the land clean. These mosses, liverworts, and hornworts are usually the first plants to kind of show up on that newly exposed habitat. Oops. They grow in lots of places though, like all around the world, usually in places that are moist and temperate. Like, so temperate meaning like the New York, New Jersey area. It's like a temperate area because they need water for the sperm to swim. So that's usually where they occur, in these moist or temperate forests. But there are some species that actually live in places like the desert or in the Arctic. Some of them grow on other plants and are called epiphytes. But just so you know, they're all over the place. Okay, whew. Breather moment. So this is a picture. This is a picture from Connecticut that I took in a temperate forest. And as you can see, like, there's a rock with some green stuff on it right here. And the green stuff on it is these non-vascular plants. Look, here is a dead tree covered in green stuff. So those are those non-vascular plants. So you've seen them. There's probably some, if you walked outside right now and looked around, you'd probably see some non-vascular plants. Just probably haven't noticed them before. Here's another picture. This is, you can see a bunch of non-vascular plants growing on this dead tree. A close-up of a bunch of non-vascular plants. Yeah, Jennifer, you have a question?
Yes, how come that grows on the building like that? What causes it to grow on a building? You've ever seen it? Have you ever seen it on a building?
Oh yeah, I've seen it on buildings. I've seen it in subway platforms. I've seen it on sewer grates. So the reason is that, remember I said that they are like usually the first plants to show up on like newly exposed habitat. So for the mosses, liverworts, and hornworts, they look at the side of a building, or well, they don't look at it, but they, you know, you put a building there or sidewalk there, and to them it's just new habitat, that there's no competition there. There's just like open space for them to grow. And because they don't have vascular tissue, they don't have roots. They don't have leaves. They don't have, you can't have roots and leaves and stems without xylem and phloem. So their body structure is so different. They just absorb water into themselves without via processes of osmosis and diffusion. But the point is, they don't need dirt even. Like, they don't need soil. They can just grow on a rock, or they can grow on, like you said, a building, or a dead tree, or soil, sure, but they don't need it. And so that's why.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. If you see someone growing on a building, take a picture and post it in or send it to me email.
I'm on it. On it.
Good. All right, so here's more of these close-ups of non-vascular plants. These are mostly leafy liverworts here. And then this is kind of, whoops, this is a hodgepodge here. I see liverworts, I see mosses. You don't need to, I just want you to appreciate how they're like small green things, right? Small green things. Here, I guess I'll use yellow. Up here, these kind of fuzzy guys, those are types of moss called sphagnum moss, which we'll learn about today. These kind of flat green things are a type of liverwort. So that's why I'm saying you probably have walked by them before and just maybe not even noticed them. Look, here's an example of some that are growing in that kind of an extreme condition, right? So it's growing in the snow. This is moss. Okay. But now more words. So we're talking about the bryophytes. The bryophytes are the non-vascular plants, mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. So first, let's talk about the gametophyte generation of those in general for all the non-vascular plants. So some things to know are that in the non-vascular plants, gametophyte generation is always the dominant generation. What do I mean by that? Look, when we see this here, that's the gametophyte generation that we see with our eyes. That's the gametophyte generation that we see with our eyes. All that green stuff is the gametophyte generation. We do not see the sporophyte generation yet. Okay? That's why we say it's dominant, because it's the part of the life cycle that the non-vascular plant usually exists in, is the gametophyte plant. And because the gametophyte is the dominant generation, sporophyte is never free living. Sporophyte always remains attached to the gametophyte plant. Always, always, always for the non-vascular plants. This is an important slide, guys. So I would make a note of this slide. Definitely stuff here that will show up on quizzes and exams for sure. So in the non-vascular plants, the gametophyte plant is the dominant plant. The gametophyte plant is larger than the sporophyte plant. The gametophyte plant is photosynthetic. How do we know that? It's green. Gametophyte plant is green. So therefore it has chloroplast, therefore it has chlorophyll, therefore it does photosynthesis. So gametophyte is larger than the sporophyte, photosynthetic, long-lived, right? That's what the plant usually exists as the gametophyte plant in the non-vascular plants. And the gametophyte plant is independent of the sporophyte plant. So the gametophyte plant can exist all on its own, does not need to be attached to the sporophyte plant. Sporophyte plant has to be attached to the gametophyte plant though. But to see, independent. And most importantly, probably, most importantly is that the gametophyte plant is haploid. Haploid, because it grew via mitosis from a spore. And the spore was haploid when it got released So the gametophyte plant is haploid. It's important. Well, we're talking about a gametophyte plant. So we know gametophyte plant makes gametes, egg and sperm, right? And we already learned the sex organs that those gametes or egg and sperm is made in. And so those sex organs, the archegonia and antheridia, are going to be on the gametophyte plant, right? Just to recall from earlier when you're going through these slides, the names of these organs. Okay, so here is we're not talking about a moss or a liverwort or a hornwort specifically right now. We're just talking about all the non-vascular plants in general. So here's an example of some female sex structures on a non-vascular plant. And because it's growing on a gametophyte plant, we know that the sex structure, or the archegonium, is going to be haploid because it's on the gametophyte plant. And the parts of the archegonium are these things. So usually there's a little short stalk. I'll show you on the thing here. You have a little short stalk that attaches the archegonium, right? Archegonium attaches the archegonium to the gametophyte plant. Then you have this swollen area. You don't need to know the word venter, but you have the swollen area that holds the egg. There's an egg right there. And then there's this canal cells. They're kind of like a long pokey. And what those do is they protect the egg, but when the egg is ready to be fertilized, those cells will break down and there will become a hole. They'll break down and there'll be a hole that gets made right there where the sperm can swim down to meet the egg. So those are parts of the archegonium. Here's the parts of an antheridium. So the antheridium is a male sex organ. It's on that gametophyte plant, so we know it has to be haploid. And it also has a little short stalk, some cells that protect the contents, and then lots of sperm producing cells. So just to get you oriented here. So this whole thing on the right is a antheridium. Here's the short stalk that's attaching it to the gametophyte plant. The outside is like a layer of sterile cells that are just protecting the insides. And then on the inside is this darker stuff here is sperm producing cells, which fancy word for that is spermatogenous or the generation of sperm. But you don't need to know spermatogenous. Just know that in the inside of an antheridium is all these sperm producing cells that are also haploid at this point. So, oh yeah, if you see this term, just know that it just means this, but you don't need to know spermatogenous. Okay. So we learned that in the non-vascular plants, the gametophyte is dominant. It's larger than the sporophyte. It's independent of the sporophyte. It's photosynthetic. On it is antheridia, male sex organs, and archegonia, female sex organs. Female sex organs going to make egg, male sex organs going to make sperm. And they require water for fertilization. So water from rain or mist or dew will allow the sperm to swim to the egg that's inside of that archegonium. And the egg in the archegonium actually releases chemical signals that attract the sperm, and it will swim to fertilize it. So here's, sperm. Notice, oh, so here you see N instead of 1N. Same thing. You might see this sometimes. N versus 1N. Still 1N, they just didn't put the 1, right? Versus 2N, right? So haploid sperm, or I should use the same colors as before. Haploid sperm, or 1N, haploid egg, 1N. Add them together and you end up with 2N zygote, right? Beginning of the sporophyte plant. Okay, this, right, see, look, start of the sporophyte generation. Okay, so once you have that 2N zygote, right, result of fertilization, the 2N zygote is going to be what grows into the embryo and then ultimately the mature sporophyte plant. So this is what I was trying to explain before, like here, right? This is the gametophyte here, right? And the archegonium is also part of the gametophyte, right? But notice where the egg is, right? The egg is inside of that. So when the egg gets fertilized with sperm, that's going to be where the new sporophyte plant grows. And so I'll show you what I mean on here. It's just like when a person has a baby, right? Like the egg is inside of the woman, the baby grows inside of the woman, right? The egg doesn't like walk around and go somewhere else, right? It stays like right there. And that's kind of what this is trying to show you too, in that, right? Like here, this is all gametophyte plant. This is that archegonium, right? And the egg was inside of there, but that egg has already been fertilized and turned into a 2N zygote. And that 2N zygote is already grown into an embryo, but notice that the embryo is still inside of that gametophyte plant, right? Because that's where the egg was. It's also a good slide to show you. Remember I said the neck cells kind of disintegrate to allow the sperm to come in. So you can see here that there's a void there because they already did that, obviously, because the egg already got fertilized. Okay. Eventually, so there's an embryo, but eventually it's going to grow bigger. And in the non-vascular plants, most of the sporophyte plants are really, really super small. And they usually consist of a foot, something called a seta, which is just a fancy word for a stalk. So here's the foot of a sporophyte plant. Here's the seta of a sporophyte plant, or the fancy stalk. And then what does a sporophyte plant need to make? What does a sporophyte plant make? Remember, sporo, It's a phyte or a plant that makes yes, spores. I got it in the chat box. Sorry, I didn't see it. Yes. Thank you. So yeah, since the sporophyte plant is a phyte or a plant that makes spores, we have to have a structure that makes spores, right? An organ that makes spores. And the organ is called the sporangium. And so here is the sporangium. Whoa, boy, really bad at drawing. This whole thing here, it's called a capsule. In the non-vascular plants, capsule and sporangium are the same thing. Yeah, so parts of a sporophyte plant, a general sporophyte plant of the non-vascular plant's foot, seta, and then capsule. Easy enough. Capsule is going to make spores. And just a recall here in case you need a refresh of the terms. Okay. What does a foot do? It attaches the sporophyte plant to the gametophyte plant. It absorbs water from the gametophyte plant, and it also absorbs food and mineral nutrients from the gametophyte plant, because the gametophyte plant is the one that's absorbing water to begin with, and the gametophyte plant is photosynthetic. Sporophyte plant in the non-vascular plants usually is not photosynthetic, so it has to get all of its water and food from the gametophyte plant. And that exchange happens at the foot. The seta is just a stalk that holds up the sporangium or the capsule to kind of elevate it a little bit. And then the sporangium or the capsule is what makes spores, right? You have the spore mother cells inside of that sporangium that are going to undergo meiosis to make the spores, right? Spore mother cells are diploid. They undergo meiosis to turn into 4 spores. And then if we talk about just one of those spores, the spore will ultimately grow into gametophyte. Okay, that's an overview of all the non-vascular plants. Now I'm going to just show you these structures on the mosses, liverworts, and hornworts to show you them more specifically. So first we'll do the mosses. There are 3 major groups of mosses: true mosses, peat mosses, and granite mosses. In this class, we only talk about true mosses and peat mosses. So you have Nium and Polytrichum are 2 examples. I think for this class, again, I only want you to focus, oh, not a good color to use here. You don't need to know the names of the genera. Knowing true mosses is fine. True mosses is fine. But just so you could see what they look like. Yeah, just know true mosses, that's fine. You don't need to know the thing. So here's how they might look in nature. Sometimes growing off the side of a tree or off the side of a building, right? Kind of green and fluffy. So the green fluffy is the gametophyte generation. And then these little stalk-like things, stick-like things coming out is a sporophyte generation attached to the fuzzy. See, there you go again. So just to give you kind of an idea. So all this green fluffy here is gametophyte. And then the sporophyte, like here's one sporophyte, here's a capsule of the sporophyte, here is a seta of the sporophyte, and then down here, somewhere in, attached to the gametophyte is the foot. I think it might be clearer on, yeah, here you go. Okay, we just learned alternation of generation. And I know it's like a lot to learn, but let's just look at that with true mosses. So in the case of true mosses, you have female and male gametophyte plants. I'll use the same color. So like, remember this here, this would be your green fluffy, right? Gametophyte generation, dominant generation. On the top of the green fluffy will be sex organs. And that's what this is showing you close up of, right here and right here. So on top of the male gametophyte plant are male sex organs. And on top of the female gametophyte plant are female sex organs. Male sex organs are going to make sperm. Female sex organs are going to, here's sperm. Whoops. Male sex organs are going, okay. Male sex organs are going to make sperm. Female sex organs are going to make egg, right? So eventually a raindrop or something like that will drop on top. I always think amigos when I say like raindrop, drop top. But yeah, eventually the raindrop will drop on top of the gametophyte plant. And when that, the male gametophyte plant, when that happens, that lets the sperm swim in the water. So look, the raindrop dropped on top of this plant and it splashes onto the female gametophyte plant, bringing the sperm with it. And then the sperm, I don't know if you could see them. This is a close-up of a sperm. It's kind of like a horror movie. But look, here's a little sperm right here. And the sperm is going to be able to swim in the water, swim, swim, swim. Look, there's one right there swimming, swim, 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 to meet the egg. And when that happens, they will fuse. Oh, here you go. It shows it better. Shows it better over here. Look, sperm, right? Swim, 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 boom, reaches the egg. Egg is located in the female sex organ, right? Archegonium. And eventually that will make the egg and the sperm fuse to make the 2N zygote. Okay, let me do this. Yeah, this is just showing you where the sex organs are located, those red circles. So that's a diagram. Here's real microscope slide. This is a true moss slide. Top of a female gametophyte plant. And I'll use yellow. So here is one archegonium. Here is the neck part of it. Here is the stalk part of it. Here's the swollen part, and here's the egg. And so there's another archegonium here, another archegonium here, another one here, etc. Lots of them. Each with one egg. Each archegonium has one egg. Many archegonia have lots of eggs. But each one only has one egg inside. Here is the top of the male gametophyte plant. On the top of the male gametophyte plant, I guess I'll use red. There's a lot of antheridia. Here's one. It has a little stalk attaching it to the gametophyte plant. It has a protective layer of cells, and then inside all of those sperm producing cells. Here's another antheridium, here's another antheridium, here's another antheridium, here's another antheridium, right? There's lots. Okay, so the sperm swims to the egg, fertilization occurs, and then the new sporophyte plant, I'll use the same color. So look, fertilization, 2N zygote, where the egg was, going to divide via the process of mitosis to become an embryo, and then via mitosis again, it's going to grow to make sporophyte plant. And in the case of the mosses, sporophyte plant is always going to be attached to gametophyte plant, right? So this is gametophyte plant. Sporophyte plant is always going to be attached. Okay. This is the same thing, but this is going further. So we left off here, right, in the previous slide. Remember on the previous, I said this is a gametophyte, or I'm doing orange, right? And so here you go, it's gametophyte as well, down there, down here. Sporophyte plant's going to grow out. And so there's a young sporophyte plant growing out. Eventually, sporophyte plant is going to have a foot. Here, I'll do this one. A foot, a seta, right, which is a stalk, and a capsule, which is going to be where these spores are made. Okay. So that was the example of true mosses. The peat mosses are the same thing, same exact things that we just went over. Yeah, all the peat mosses that exist are in this one genus. The only difference is that in the peat mosses don't have a seta. The sporophyte does not have a seta. Instead, they have this thing called a pseudopodium. Pseudo means fake and podium means foot. Don't worry about that, but I'll show you on the next slide. They don't have, the only difference is they don't have a seta. They have a pseudopodium. I'll show you here. Right. Okay, so here is sporophyte plant of a peat moss. Sporophyte plant of a peat moss has a capsule, kind of looks almost like a olive. And there will be a little tiny foot that's inside of there, but there's no seta. Remember, seta is that stalk thing. Instead, the thing that elevates the capsule is this, which is part of the gametophyte plant, and that's the pseudopodium. I think I draw it on here. Yeah. So they're the same. So like the alternation of generations for the true mosses and the peat mosses are the same. The only difference is the peat mosses don't have a seta. They have this thing called a pseudopodium, which is actually part of the gametophyte plant. Okay. Yikes. Okay, let's see here. I'm just gonna see real quick where we're at, because this is long. Yeah, okay. I think we're just gonna keep going. Yeah. This is a long one. I know. Where did you guys go now? I lost you guys. Oh, geez. Okay, share screen. Okay, we're just gonna keep going. So that was the mosses, and we're gonna go through the liverworts. Liverworts are flat green things. That's all. They have a flat thing, which is called a thallus, right? But just liverwort, no liverwort. Here you go. Don't worry about Marcantiophyta. Just look at the picture. Liverworts. Those are those flat green ribbon looking things. Now in this slide, there's also a couple fuzzies, and those are actually the peat mosses that we just talked about. But the other stuff around it, all that green, almost looks like ribbon. I guess red's not a good one to use. All this green stuff here, those are liverworts. This is one, liverwort gametophytes. Okay. Oh. Okay. Yes. There's two types of liverworts. Most of them are flat and green, which we call phalloid, which just means flat and green. Some of them are leafier and look like a moss, shown on the right. The ones we're going to talk about are just the flat ones, Yeah, so like mosses, you'll see them growing on rocks. They can grow on sides of buildings as well. Sometimes they grow on other plants. If something grows on another plant, we call it an epiphyte. Yeah, this is another example of it growing on a plant. Sometimes liverworts are aquatic and they either float in water or they live completely submerged, like here. if any of you have a freshwater fish tank and you have plants in it, most chances are that some of your plants are actually liverworts. They're very popular in the aquarium trade. And so, you know, I had seen liverworts a lot of times in like botanical gardens, like at the New York Botanical Garden. This whole area is like tons of liverworts, but I had never seen liverworts in person, like on the fly. The first time I saw it was in Newark, New Jersey, right outside the law building. And I was like stopped cold in my tracks when I saw that. So this was my first time ever seeing liverworts. They were growing growing in like next to a rain gutter on bricks. I took this photo. So you can see them all over the place, even in Newark. Liverworts are small. Look here at the dime, right? For scale. So they're super, super small. And again, when we're looking at the green things here, those are the gametophytes, right? Okay. So just like the mosses, they don't have any vascular tissue, right? They're non-vascular plants. They're very similar to the mosses. The only thing, I'm just trying to see here what I want you, yeah, one of the main differences of liverworts versus mosses is they have these special structures that elevate the sex organs, which we didn't have in the mosses. Remember, in the mosses, and we'll have a comparison slide toward the end here, but in the mosses, the sex organs just occurred on the top of the green fluffy, right? Just at the very top. On liverworts, there's a special new structure that holds up the sex organs. And they're all also big, scary words. So there's two structures that hold up the sex organs in the liverworts. There's antheridio4 and archegonia4. I know. Just know the way you can remember this is 4 means to bear something. So it's a structure that bears antheridia. And this one is a structure that bears archegonia. And remember, antheridia are the male sex organs. Archegonia are the female sex organs. So here you go. I'll show you here. Let me move this thing. There we go. Okay, get out of there. So here we go. We have male gametophyte plant over here, female gametophyte plant over here, right? It's a flat shape, right? A thalloid shape, right? They both have that. And they have these special structures that elevate the sex organs. So here on the male, antheridio4, this whole thing is an antheridia4. And the antheridia are going to be on that. Down here in the female sex organs, this whole thing is an archegonia4, and the archegonia are going to be located there. And then eventually the sporophytes will be located there, because don't worry about that, because the archegonia has an egg. All right, let's get out of this. Oi, clear. Okay. So that's one main difference between mosses and liverworts. Liverworts have these special sex elevators, right? These structures that elevate the sex organs, whereas mosses don't have that. Right. This is what I was saying before. Before is that end of that word for means the bearer of, right? So like structure, the bearer of antheridia, right? That's what I was saying before. Before. All right. Okay. So this was a pretty old drawing of this, right? Like this is a mad old drawing. Here's also a mad old drawing of this. You'll see it better on other ones coming up. But so we said those antheridia 4s and archegonia 4s, and on them they have the sex organs. Reason why I show you this is because, so here is the top of an archegonia 4, and the archegonia are going to be on the bottom of it, down there. Here is the top of a antheridio 4, and the male sex organs or antheridia are going to be on the top of it. just getting you oriented with that because you'll see it, it'll make more sense. So here's what they look like in real life. These are anthoridiophores coming out of the gametophyte plants of liverwort. And each of these, yellow, I guess is good here, or even white. So here's the top of one antheridiaphore. Here's the top of another antheridiaphore. Here's a nice one here because you can see it's little, it's being elevated. And on each of those things are lots and lots and lots of antheridia. So here are again on the left. This is a microscope slide on the top right, where you could see all the antheridia inside. So this is the top of one antheridiaphore, lots of antheridia all up there. And then this is a close-up of one antheridium that looks similar to something we already saw today from before. Antheridia looks the same pretty much in all these. Here's your archegoniaphores. Archegoniaphores to me look like little palm trees. That's how I remember. I've had students before tell me they look like little octopuses or octopi. But anyways, each of these things, so here's the top of an archegoniaphore, here's another top of it, here's another top of it. They're all being elevated up. And on each of these arms of the octopus or parts of the palm tree, on each of these arms will be lots and lots and lots of archegonia. So here is those little palm trees I was just talking about on the left, right? There's two archegoniaphores. And then this is a cross section through one of those, right? So you can think of it as like if we did a cross section, like here is the top of one archegoniaphore. And if we did a cross section so that we look at like these two arms, that's what this is trying to show you. And as I said before, the archegonia are going to be located underneath. So here's a bunch of archegonia right there. And here's a close-up of one of them. She has an egg right here. And it looks like there's actually a sperm coming to meet it right there. But yeah. This is life cycle of liverwort. It's basically the exact same thing that we saw in the mosses. It's basically the exact same thing. The only differences are, number one, the liverwort is flat and green and not fluffy and green. And number two, it has these new structures on the gametophyte plant that elevate the sex organs, right? So just to go through it briefly, because it's the same thing we saw before with the mosses, I'm going to highlight the things that you should worry about, right? Like the main points. There's a lot of stuff on here you don't need to know, but I'll highlight the main points. So you have a spore. We're going to talk just about this one. There's one going to a female gametophyte. There's another one. Oh my God, I got to move this thing. Can't even get to it. There's another one here going to a male gametophyte plant. But spores grow into gametophytes. This spore grew into a female gametophyte. This spore grew into a male gametophyte. They need water for the sperm to swim, right? So, or I'll back up. Hold on. Back it up, back it up. Haploid spore is going to grow into gametophyte plant. Here is a female gametophyte plant. Here's another spore. Here's a male gametophyte plant. Gametophyte plants make egg and sperm. We're talking about a liverwort because it's flat, right? Flat and green. There are special structures that elevate the sex organs. On the female gametophyte plant, special structure is archegoniaphore. Looks like a palm tree. On male gametophyte plant, structure is antheridiaphore. Looks kind of like an umbrella, right? Oops, right here. On the archegoniaphore are lots of archegonia. On the antheridiophore are lots of antheridia. Antheridia make sperm. Archegonia make egg, which is not shown on this slide. Raindrop lands on top of the Antheridia-4, splashes sperm out of the Antheridia. Sperm lands and the water lands on the top of the Archegonia-4, and then sperm swims to meet an egg. Okay, it's like I said, it's basically the same thing as what we saw. Look, here's a close-up. Sperm, swim. Sperm is going to meet the egg located in an archegonium. Once the sperm and egg meet, right? So here's sperm. Swim, meets an egg in an archegonia. Here's a close-up of one archegonium. Look, here's egg waiting. Here's sperm swimming. And they're going to fuse to make your 2N zygote, right? Via fertilization. Egg plus sperm, 2N zygote. Just like we saw in the mosses. The only difference is that special structure. This is just like we saw in the mosses. 2N zygote is going to divide into an embryo. Embryo is going to continue to grow and divide into a sporophyte plant. Here's young sporophyte plant starting to emerge. And then here's our parts that we talked about before. But now we're looking in a liverwort, right? You have foot. So this whole thing here, sorry, I should say this, right? Like here it's saying young sporophyte. Don't worry about meiosis yet. This whole thing here is mature sporophyte. See, mature sporophyte. Mature sporophyte has things we already learned. Foot that attaches it to a gametophyte plant. Seta, right? Stalk holding it up, or in this case, upside down. And then capsule, where the spores are made. And that brings us back to this meiosis thing, right? So inside the capsule or inside the sporangium is where meiosis is going to occur so that spores are produced, right? And then oops, I lost. Yeah, and then, oops. Eventually the spores will get released. So yeah, eventually the spores will get released. This capsule will open here, just so you aren't lost about where this is. So this is the top of one of those archegonia 4s with all the sporophytes hanging upside down. And then eventually those sporophytes are going to release the spores, and the spores are going to get released and grow into the next gametophyte plant. Okay. This is just what spores look like in real life. Don't worry about that. Okay, this is what I wanted to get to. This is comparing sporophyte plants of the liverworts, which are shown on the left, and the mosses, which are shown on the right. Oops. So they both have a foot, they both have a seta, and they both have capsule, right? This is a good way to organize your thoughts. So here, we'll do moss first. Moss is on the right. This is where the sporophyte's foot is. Here's the sporophyte's seta, and here's the sporophyte's capsule or sporangium, right? All this green fluffy is gametophyte, right? For the liverworts, here's the liverwort's foot, here's the liverwort's stalk, and here's the capsule, aka sporangium. Same parts, just that the only difference is the liverwort one, because it's growing off of these palm tree looking things, the archegonia 4s. In the liverworts, the sporophyte plant hangs upside down, whereas in the mosses, it grows upright towards the sky. Okay. Whew. All right. I'm going to try to get through the rest of this in like probably 15, 20 minutes. So hang in there. I know this is a really long one. If you're still awake, thank you. And and no matter what, if you spaced out or fell asleep, just know that the recording will be available later too. Okay, but hopefully you paid attention a little bit so you don't have to watch the whole thing again. So here's hornwort. Hornwort, it's called hornwort because the sporophyte plant looks like a horn. That's this part coming up. The green blob is the gametophyte plant. So hornwort looks like a horn. Here you go. You don't need to know the phylum name. No hornwort. All these orangey stick things in the middle are hornwort sporophytes. All the green flat stuff around it are hornworts. Hornworts and liverworts look very similar in that way, in that they're both flat. They grow the same places that mosses and liverworts grow. They grow on trees and other plants just like mosses and liverworts. And much like my first time ever seeing a liverwort in real life, like not at a botanical garden, but like in the world, the first time I ever saw hornworts was also in Newark, New Jersey. I couldn't believe it. So this was taken in right outside New Jersey Institute of Technology when you walk towards the Rutgers campus. Couldn't believe it. Oh, sorry, this is right outside of Smith Hall. Crazy. Like I said, you see here on the right, that thing on the bottom. So the green blobby part is the gametophyte plant and the sporophyte plant is the horn part. Just like the mosses and the liverworts, hornworts are non-vascular. So they don't have xylem and they don't have phloem. This is what gametophyte plants, that's what I'm trying to show you with this circle, is that the green blobby stuff is the gametophyte plant, right? Okay. They're super small. Here on the bottom left, you can see a dime. So that whole thing is one hornwort with both of the generations on it. I'll use pink. Hornwort gametophyte plant, hornwort sporophyte plant, right? Attached to the gametophyte plant, but super small. I mean, look, here's a dime. So super, super small. All right. Gametophyte plants, just like the mosses and just like the liverworts, the gametophyte plants have sex organs on them, right? Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. How are they different? Oh, for the sporophyte, how is it different? The main reason it's different is that it looks like a horn. And it also has no seta. Instead, it has this thing called a basal meristem, which is kind of important. So like when we have learned about meristems in the past, we've learned about like apical meristem. So a meristem at the tip, right? But if you're a hornwort sporophyte and you had your meristem at the tip right here, you're so small. The chances of that tip getting broken off is pretty good. And so that would really make it bad for your growth if that was the case. So instead, hornworts have this thing called a basal meristem, such that the meristem is actually at the base of the horn. So in like right here is where the meristem would be. And so that means that the sporangium, which is the horn, sporophyte sporangium, kind of the same here in the hornworts, because this whole thing is the capsule. The horn is the capsule. But anyways, my point is that it's growing from the base. So the oldest tissue of the horn is going to be at the top, and the youngest tissue of the horn is going to be at the bottom. You might be familiar with this idea of basal meristem if you've ever cut grass, for example. So if you ever mowed the lawn, obviously the grass can't have apical meristems at the tip of the grass, because if you mowed the lawn, you would kill the grass, right? So grasses also have this basal meristem thing. Okay. This This is a cross section through a horn, and the spore producing tissue is in the middle. What else do I want you to know from here? Another thing that's different about hornworts is that the sporophyte plants actually have stomatal apparatus on them, which is a big evolutionary leap. See there? So that's on the horn. So like the horns have stomatal apparatuses on them. Other than that, no, you don't need to know anything on this slide, anything else on this slide. You already know what stomatal apparatus is. We covered that already. Oh, yeah. So Marcel is asking, does it have xylem? No. So isn't that interesting? So the sporophyte plant, that's what's so weird about it. Like the hornwort sporophyte plant is a non-vascular thing. It doesn't have any xylem, doesn't have any phloem, but it already has the stomatal apparatus. So gas exchange is already improved because it's still doing photosynthesis, right? Like all of these plants are still, oh, and that's the other thing is that the hornwort, you may have noticed that the hornwort's horn is green. And so I think we have a comparison slide at the end, but just to say in the mosses, the sporophyte was not green. It was like kind of little dry thing. In this hornworts, the sporophyte plants hung upside down from the archegoniaphores. Both of those were non-photosynthetic, those sporophytes. But in the hornworts, the sporophyte plant, which is the horn-like capsule, is green, so they actually do photosynthesis. Hence why they have a stomatal apparatus, because they need to do gas exchange. But no xylem, no phloem either. All right, we already learned about that. So just to kind of sum it up here, so this whole thing, I'll use the same colors as I did before. This whole flat thing here is a hornwort gametophyte. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sporophyte plants coming out of it. Right, here's one. The parts of that sporophyte plant, you will have a foot down here. And then you have a capsule. Whoa, that whole horn. No seta. And because the oldest tissue, remember it has that basal meristem thing that would also be located down here. The oldest tissue is going to be located up here, and that's where the spores are going to be produced. So it's showing you split. The tops of these horns are splitting, and you might see here, I don't know how well you can see it, these little dusties, those are all spores that are leaving. Whoops. Okay, and I don't think, yeah, recall basal meristem. This is just showing you them under the microscope slide. On the left, you have a microscope slide showing the top of a horn or the capsule of the hornwort sporophyte plant. And then on the right, you see all the spores close up. Okay. The alternation of generations of hornworts is the same thing that we saw in the mosses and the liverworts, same players. So let me move this. Yep. So same players, you know, spore, let me get out of here. Spores are going to grow into gametophyte plant. On the gametophyte plant, you have male sex organs and female sex organs. The sperm from the male sex organ is going to fertilize the egg in the female sex organ, the result of which will be the new sporophyte plant, which grows like a horn. A little quicker because we know the players now better, so we can talk about it faster now. Okay. This is what I was saying about the comparison slide. We have liverworts on the left, mosses in the middle, and hornworts on the right. Let's just do this once so we get it straight in our heads. So for mosses, we'll talk sporophyte plant here, sporophyte plant, because that's what we're doing, comparing the sporophytes. Moss has a foot. Liverwort sporophyte also has a foot. And hornwort sporophyte also has a foot. Moss sporophyte has a seta. Liverwort sporophyte has a seta. Hornwort sporophyte has no seta. Instead, it has basal meristem. Moss sporophyte has a sporangia or a capsule. Liverwort sporophyte has a sporangia or capsule. Hornwort sporophyte has a sporangia or capsule. The capsule or sporangia of the moss is at the tip of the seta and it points up to the sky. The capsule or sporangia of the liverwort hangs upside down from these archegonia forearms. And the capsule of a hornwort looks like a horn. Looks like a horn. That's a good, nice summary slide. Okay. Asexual reproduction is not going to take long at all. So we just learned about alternation of generations. Egg and sperm coming together, haploid gametophyte plant, diploid sporophyte plant, all that stuff, right? And so in order to have, when you have gametes, egg and sperm, and the egg and the sperm come together, that's sexual reproduction. But you can also have, the non-vascular plants also use this asexual reproduction quite a bit. And what that A means in this prefix here, A means without. So this is reproduction without sex. That's what asexual reproduction means. Reproduction without sex. So, right, without gametes, egg and sperm, without sex, right? So a lot of plants are able to do this. We've talked a little bit about this in the leaf lecture, but just so you know, so for asexual reproduction, there's no sperm and egg involved. There's no fertilization involved. There's no genetic exchange involved. And when you do asexual reproduction, if you have any new plants that show up, the new plants are basically clones of that original plant, right? Identical to the original plant, because it wasn't egg and sperm coming together. It's just reproduction via asexual mechanisms. So, oh, well, this is left over from my spring class, but this is trying to show you that if you're having reproduction without gametes, the process that's involved is mitosis, because you're just growing new structures. You're not having egg and sperm. Don't worry about that. How does asexual reproduction work in the non-vascular plants? There's a couple different ways. One way is by something called fragmentation. So sometimes a moss or liverwort or hornwort will just get, the gametophyte will just get broken up. Let's say you're walking down a city street and you walk on moss. You might break it up a little bit. When that happens, each of those little pieces will actually grow into a new plant that's genetically identical to the plant that it was. So it's kind of like you can take a liverwort and a liverwort gametophyte and rip it up into a lot of different bits and then throw it on the ground, and each of those bits will grow into a new gametophyte plant. That's called fragmentation. Another way of fragmentation of the whole body. Another way that non-vascular plants do asexual reproduction is via fragmentation of something called gemmy cup and gemmy. And I'll show you what that looks like here. So on liverwort, for example, are these little cups. And inside of those those cups are called gemmicups. And inside of those gemmicups are little tiny fragments called gemmy. So here is, oh, I don't know if yellow is good to use. I'll use purple. Here is a gemmy cup. Here is a gemmy cup. Here is a gemmy cup, etc. And inside of the gemmy cup is these little green, they almost look like green jelly beans. that are called gemi. And those gemi are, well, I'll just show you. If those gemi, I'll just show you. This is a cross section through a gemma cup. This is one gemma cup. And inside of this gemma cup are all these little things, kind of look like little jelly bean things. Those are all of the gemi. Can't talk. What happens is if rain, let's say rain like drops into here, like a big raindrop drops into this gemma cup. What happens is it splashes out the gemi. And I'll show you a video of that coming up here. And each of those gemi can grow into a new liverwort plant. Let me stop sharing this and pull this up here. And I think this is basically the end of this very long lecture. Let me pause. All right, and then share. Where are you guys? Okay. Share screen. Here we go. It doesn't have sound, so don't worry about sound. But so here's a gemi cup. And what's going to happen is a drop of water is going to go into the gemi cup and splash out the gemi. So here we go. Boom. See? And all the little gemi fly out with the raindrop or whatever other water source. And each of them, if they land somewhere, can grow into a whole new liverwort gametophyte plant. So this is an example of reproduction asexually, right? Asexual reproduction. Don't need egg and sperm, you just need gemi. So that's something that's common in the non-vascular plants. Okay. And I think we're basically there, guys. Oi, is it? Yes. Yes.
I got
We did it.
a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. That
Sure.
that last video, does that open or stays open all the time to reproduce like that? Like, is there a process where it closes at some points?
No. Basically, like here, if you even go back to this here, don't get dizzy when I go here. Here, you can see even on this old school slide, they're just like structures here, like you see here. They're just literally like little bowls or little cups that are on the surface of the plant. And no, they don't close or anything. They just hang out like that, and they have the little gemi inside. And if rain splashes into it, the little gemi fly out, and they'll make this whole other gametophyte plant. It's pretty cool. Part of the reason why they're able to make these dense mats, like you see this super dense mat of liverworts, it's because like if one of them has a gemi cup full of gemi and you have rain, that's gonna make like right next to that one liverwort, it'll make like 10 more liverworts, and then each of those have gemi, and et cetera and et cetera.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and I was gonna go, yeah, so they don't open or close or anything like that. What was I gonna say? Okay, so the only other thing is just to remind you guys. So 2 things to remind you guys. Number 1, there's a quiz for this due by Friday before midnight. That's the first thing. Number 2, if you did not, for those pre-recorded lectures, if you didn't participate on Canvas in the threads, please do so that I can give you some participation points, because participation and attendance is 10% of your grade. And I don't want you to lose out on that opportunity to help boost up your grade. For the lecture exam we had tonight, I haven't posted the answers for it yet because I have to check to see that everybody was able to take it. But as soon as I do that, I will make those answers available to you as well. For what it's worth, most of you did really well on the exam. I was really happy to see that. I didn't pull up to see how long it took you to take the exam. I gave you guys 3 hours. This should have been plenty of time to do the exam. And from what I saw so far, lots of people getting A's and B's, some really high grades. and I think even 100. I think we even got 100. So, but yeah, great job. Keep it up and just stay focused. We have 2 weeks left and then we're done. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them here, or you can send me an email. And otherwise, I will see you guys next Monday. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you, Professor. Have a wonderful night.
Too. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone. Good night.